this one was just one I wanted to show you.
What is this one?
This is The Common Mind by Andre Gusterstmore, I think is how you pronounce his name.
Nothing is better than getting a book that already has like the pages marked out. Like, read this.
Yeah.
It's highlight. Let's see. Just go.
So,
all right.
So it's a series of overviews of a number of different writers that were basically trying to continue the tradition of Christian humanism into the modern times, either because they were converted to it throughout their life with somebody like T.S. Eliot, or somebody that was like Jonathan Swift, who was a defender of it, his whole life, and it kind of gives you an overview of all of the places where there were people that fought back against the Enlightenment, sometimes successfully, sometimes less successfully, but the different places where the Enlightenment changed the way we thought about something, and by showing you somebody that was fighting against it at the time. Sometimes they lost, sometimes they won.
Did you just bring this book by accident? So, The Common Mind, Politics, Society, and Christian Humanism, from Thomas More to Russell Kirk.
Yeah, so I brought it just because I wanted to show it to you, because we've talked about this.
Oh, this is crazy.
And then you were like, well, hey, I want to record something.
You come in
first.
the studio. Yeah, so Jason comes in the studio. And you come in the studio, and I'm like, Jason, I can't remember what started it, but I was like, hey, man, I think I need to wrap my head around the Enlightenment, because everything that is going on, Jared was saying he's committed to the
pre-Enlightenment Presbyterianism.
Yeah, and I was like, I heard that, and I'm like, cool, I don't know what that is, but all right, sounds. I guess it's a good thing because you're a good guy, so I guess it's a good thing. But what is that? And so I was like, Jason, I got to wrap my head around the Enlightenment, because it seems like everything that we're dealing with now somehow is connected directly back to the Enlightenment or some fruit of the Enlightenment. But I don't really know how or why.
Yeah. I've been calling it. I've been trying to come up with a name for it, because nobody has really developed a nomenclature on what it exactly is. But I've been calling it excuse me. I've been calling it reformational Christian humanism.
Reformation. I'm sorry.
Reformational Christian humanism is what I've been calling it, or pre-Enlightenment Protestantism, historic Protestantism sometimes. But people even then don't quite know what you're talking about.
Right. That's why I'm looking at you like this right now, because that's all before the Enlightenment.
Right, yeah, because the Protestant Reformation is a pre-Enlightenment phenomenon, right? Historically speaking, it comes before the Enlightenment. So, and some people say, "Oh, the Enlightenment is the fruit of the Reformation," and there's a sense in which it is, but not in the way you tend to think about it. Protestantism was an attempt to retain the historic Christian position on a lot of different theological, philosophical, political topics. And the high Roman Catholicism was moving away from the historic position on a lot of them. And the Enlightenment, this is me as a Protestant describing it, but the Enlightenment was the attempt to hold on to those high medieval Roman Catholic worldview issues and double down on them in a way that the Reformation was opposing. So you have a united Christendom through medieval Europe, but then the Reformation starts to break it up into a couple of different camps because there are people calling for reform, saying that these that some of the things that the Pope was doing in the Roman Catholic Church and the bishops were doing, archbishops were involved in, weren't the historic Christian positions, or weren't biblical, or were moving away from the fathers, moving away from the Christian understanding of things. So, Martin Luther says, "Hey, let's debate these topics," and on on All Hallows Eve, he puts up a call for debate. Here's the places where I think that we need to discuss what is actually the historic Christian position on these things. When the Pope decides to send, instead of send somebody to debate, decides to send assassins, you have it become clear that there's a problem.
That actually happened. The Pope sends assassins to a debate.
Right. Well, so instead of a debate, so the debate, a debate's never really set up. He wants a debate.
Martin Luther does.
Martin Luther wants a debate, right? That's what he's asking for. He's not even necessarily asking for a reformation, really. He wants a return to some on some of these positions, but some of them he's not even settled on himself yet. He just knows, okay, there's something we need to discuss this. What he's reading the Fathers, he's reading Bernard of Clairvaux, a medieval theologian. He's reading these theologians, and he's saying, I think we've gotten off track, but I don't know exactly what it's going to look like for us to get back on track. Let's have some debates. And through a series of events, instead of debates happening, you end up with assassins sent, and the prince hides Martin Luther and rescues him. And you think something's gone wrong.
The prince. So okay. I had to stop eating.
The German prince.
So I'm trying to figure this out. So you have the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
That institution's trying to assassinate Martin Luther.
Yeah.
Who's trying to figure out how we get back to the basic biblical principles. So, because we're drifting, and it's obvious we're drifting. Yeah. Martin Luther's like, hey, let's just have a debate so we can work through this, so we can have a conversation and get to the foundations. I'm not even trying to overthrow you necessarily. Right. I just want to get back to the foundations of this. The prince has to come in and get Martin Luther and hide him.
Right, and protect him. Right. And
so just the debate itself questioned the integrity of the Catholic Church.
Right. Right.
Okay.
And there's been a couple of 100 years where this understanding of of authority is being rethought and redeveloped into what eventually becomes the papal infallibility, but even those doctrines hadn't really been developed yet. But it's a question of authority. Who gets to decide? What's the nature of that authority? Right. That's one of the questions that's coming up, and what the Protestants end up arguing for is that the Scriptures exist in the world as a public authority as literature, right? That the Bible exists as a public authority, right? That there isn't, and then the Bible then establishes other authorities in the world. God establishes other authorities in the world, but He governs them all by the public authority of the Bible, right? And the Roman Catholics argue that the Bible is an authority, but the public authority is the Pope, and the Bible is a co-authority, but the Pope is the public authority.
Okay, so pause real quick. All I'm hearing is theonomy versus autonomy and natural law, right?
That's because that's all you ever hear.
Okay, yeah. In that case, we're right on page. No, but I'm serious though. There is a question of, is God's word ultimately authoritative?
Right. Yeah. So,
and speaking to everything,
and that theonomy is a particular way of theonomy as a general principle is Protestantism. Mm-hmm. When it gets down to the application points, I think there's still a lot that we need to work out. What does it actually mean?
We're just like Martin Luther. Yeah, Let's work it out. Don't send assassins for us.
Exactly. But the Protestant, the Protestant, which is the what actually where Protestants get their name, which is the legal filing of a desire to have the authority issues settled. That really kicks off a a divide that can have sort of sides. So you've got because before that you had people that ended up Roman Catholics and people that ended up Protestants all asking for reform together, right? So you've got Martin Luther and Erasmus both wanting reform, and you've got all these Christian humanists all wanting reform together. Thomas More wants reform, but he and Erasmus wants reform. They end up siding on the legal issues on the Roman Catholic side, but they are Christian humanists. So when we would read them, often you would read them and think, well, actually they're actually closer to Protestants in terms of their ideology and a lot of their questions because they're of their Christian humanism. But then when it comes down to the matter of authority and how the authority of the scriptures is exercised in the world, they end up on the Roman Catholic side, that the Bible can't exist as just a simple public authority, that the public authority as a simple infallible public authority, that you have to have an infallible public authority that isn't just a book. Right.
Right. So for me, I'm thinking the government is absolutely authority.
Right.
But they get their authority from what the Bible says that they get their authority from as a civil magistrate.
Right.
And so they're arguing that no, by nature they are an authority and they get to decide however it is they use that authority.
Yeah. So you have the debate comes down to, and there's other debates. There's really important debates about worship, sacramental debates that are really metaphysical debates amongst the Reformers and the Roman Catholics. But the debate about authority is actually where it's all kicked off. And can you have an infallible public authority that is a work of literature, right? The scriptures, the Bible. Can it exist as an infallible public authority and have other authorities that are real authorities but fallible authorities that are public, and because they are established by the scriptures, that are then covenantally dependent upon their definitions from the scriptures, so that you can have a king that is that breaks the covenant and therefore loses his authority because he's not actually upholding the authority that he really has. He has tried to take a different authority than he has.
Okay.
So, which is what the arguments that kick off the English Reformation, what becomes the German Reformation. Germany hadn't really been founded yet. Germany was a series of different princes. So England had already been unified into a single nation, but Germany hadn't been yet. So you have a series of princes up in Germany that are trying to figure out who is the authority that they have to listen to. Do they have to listen to the Pope because he is the public infallible authority when acting as the Pope, or do they have to listen to the scriptures as the public infallible authority only? Because the scriptures are an authority, but are they the public authority? Are they the...
Bro, this sounds like 2020 all over again.
Right. So what ends up happening is the Protestants all say the Bible is the only infallible public authority, but it exists as a public authority as a book. Right? So
that's funny because that's almost when you look at America, we do that with a constitution instead of a king.
It's the same. Yeah. So and that understanding that you can that's the foundations of constitutional law come from these debates about the relationship of the Bible to society. And so,
keep going. I'm sorry. I'm just getting excited.
Right.
Go ahead.
So because you go back to, the foundations of common law when it's first being started, I almost brought my book about, Alfred the Great and Boethius, comparing the translation. So Alfred the Great was one of the great kings of England. He is the one that really kicks off the common law tradition by establishing the book of Deuteronomy as the law of England.
You can do that?
You can do that. So, but with the understanding that not only is Deuteronomy being established, it's the system that Deuteronomy is, which is case law, is being established. So,
and you said I think about theonomy all the time.
Well, this is why when we talk, you're always like, you're just talking theonomy. I'm like, well, this is
yes. I just put a title to it. It's okay.
Maybe a lot of theonomists that I've talked to are actually revolutionaries, though, and not conservatives.
I don't think you're wrong about that. I just think that they make us theonomists look bad. Anyway,
right, yeah. So you have the establishment of the common law tradition begins with the establishment of God's law and the system that exists in between Exodus and Deuteronomy. So, which is case law. So you have the idea being that you're going to have a developing wisdom within the people, so long as they are godly, right? That the people, as a people, can grow in wisdom so long as they're godly, and that the common law system is one of the ways that you develop legal wisdom through the ages, because case law is passed down and studied, and it is not an infallible authority because it can be overturned if you gain wisdom that you didn't have in previous generations. Right. But the wisdom of the generations is moving in a particular direction so long as you remain godly as a people. So that eventually becomes the constitutional law, which is developed in the 1200s and then spreads throughout the world. And then that comes into conflict with the Roman Catholic understanding of itself, with the papal understanding of itself in the 1500s, so that you've got a developing. So you can take England as an example, right? Henry VIII, who often gets a bad rap for the wrong things. So he marries his brother's widow. And then realizes that he thinks that is probably wrong, right? That because of some exegesis out of the Old Testament, as well as some questions about that the English are dealing with at the time, so he asks for an annulment of his marriage from the Pope, and the Pope says no.
I've heard the story before.
Yeah. So you will sometimes hear people say, well, and then the reformers saw an opportunity, and so they said, we'll grant you a divorce. But actually, it becomes this really crazy legal debate, because your king's marriage is not just an issue that is only for, it's not a private issue,
yeah,
right? Because it's
setting a precedent.
You're setting a precedent for the whole people. You're also deciding who is going to be the legal next ruler, who's going to inherit the throne.
Yeah, and what's the equity of this particular standard of this law that we're going to make this decision off of? Right,
because and Henry understands that. He's an incredibly intelligent, charismatic guy. And so he understands all this. And so he brings in all of the great legal experts. And Thomas Cranmer, who is one of the great legal experts, who also is I believe they were called Lutherans at the time, but it's not Lutheran the way we think of Lutheran, a follower of the Reformation. He gives the best legal argument for the annulment based on the fact that within the common law tradition, you actually can't marry your brothers. It's actually in the Westminster Confession.
It never was in play.
Yeah, that you aren't actually allowed to marry your the widow of your siblings in English common law. And whether or not that's a good law or not, it was the law of the land. And he says, so it doesn't really matter what the Pope says, because the Pope doesn't have jurisdiction over English law.
Yeah, sphere sovereignty right there.
That was the revolutionary thing in the Pope's mind. Well, of course I do. They'd been claiming to have they had been claiming superiority over the laws of all of the Christendom since the 1300s when and a lot of this goes back to Holy Roman Empire law and canon law, right? That they had begun making a claim. So the Holy Roman Emperor was said to be the seat of Paul, and the Bishop of Rome was said to be the seat of Peter. And Paul rebuked Peter to his face, and so sometimes the emperor was expected to correct. They were expected to correct one another. There was a
checks and balances. Yeah.
Right? And what ends up happening is the Pope he ends up crowning the Holy Roman Empire and starts signing all of his official documents from the seat of Peter and Paul. Right? He claims to hold both authorities because he's the one that crowned the emperor. It was Christmas Day, the emperor is crowned, and so you have this really a revolution from this 14th century Pope that says, actually, there is no authority that can check me. That works its way out over the course of the next 100 years.
So, okay, hit pause. Don't forget. Let's take a drink. Would that be like Samuel anointing David and then acting like king?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just so I understand that.
So
right.
Samuel says, well, hey, I'm the one that anointed you, so I have authority over you.
So they have some sense of how these spheres operate between the church and the state. In one sense, there's some sort of check and balance, and two governments that actually supposed to be operating. So they have
that are supposed to be in checks and balances against one another. And then, if you're someplace like in England or amongst the colonies of Great Britain, not the colonies, amongst the different nations within Great Britain, you also have still acting tribal authorities as well, right? So family authorities
those are a government themselves.
That were a government unto themselves. So you have all of these different authorities that are supposed to be checking and balancing one another, and when they are working well, it's a benefit to all the people, and the people have a lot of freedom. So that's really what the questions surrounding William Wallace is you have these tribal peoples and these tribal authorities that are coming into conflict with Edward Longshanks, who's saying, as king, I actually have authority in amongst these things that used to be your family authority, your tribe's authority. I'm going to take them all and take them away. And so you have kings that, same thing happens in Wales, right? They banish the Welsh language. They banish the Celtic language. They're terrible to the Irish. Some of the different kings are, but it's as much a legal issue as it is just a moral issue, because you have these tribal authorities that have been existing there. Well, back to Henry VIII. Henry VIII gets legal permission to marry, that his first marriage was not legal. It's annulled. Right. So it's legally as if it never was. And he remarries, and the Pope objects to his remarriage. And so they basically reorganize the authority of the English church and put the king over the church. Right. Now, that's a swing in a different direction.
They went too far.
But if you look at it in context, it's understandable. If you have, because something similar is, in Germany happens, where, and in a lot of ways, this is where nationalism begins, because the church begins attacking the people, and attacking especially those people that are trying to preach the gospel.
And we're talking about, this is Enlightenment.
This is before the Enlightenment.
Before Enlightenment.
Right.
Okay.
This is the
lead up to Enlightenment.
The lead up to it. So
you're not going to be able to do this in 30 minutes.
No, probably not. But what you end up having is this amazing moment where the state steps in and really enacts what Paul does with Peter, and rebukes rebukes Rome to its face. The Roman bishop.
And the reason
Pope
this is
to its
important
face.
is because you literally have the church functioning outside of the sphere in which it's supposed to be operating, taking to itself the sword of iron, right?
Right.
That it has over life and death, and then actually applying it to the people like they're the civil magistrate. It's like, you don't get to do our job.
Right.
Like, that's not, and you're doing it wrong.
You're doing it wrong. You don't get to do that.
So I see how they swing the pendulum so far the other way, but it's still a problem because what they do unintentionally is it eliminate ultimately any authority the church has whatsoever. They decapitate it.
Right. And they do it sort of accidentally because so while Martin Luther is in hiding, so you've got Christian humanism growing, and one of the things that happens right at the same time is Istanbul or Constantinople is defeated by the Muslims, and is renamed Istanbul. The Orthodox priests in Constantinople, the Muslims are infamous for burning libraries, so they take the libraries and they divide it up into the saddlebags of all the priests, and the priests all just leave different directions on horses.
Yeah.
They go, and a lot of them end up in Europe. One of them stays in Martin Luther's house, and as a thank you gift gives him a Greek New Testament, right? And Martin Luther then goes into hiding because they're trying to kill him, and he brings his Greek New Testament with him, and he translates the first Bible into German from this text. Another one ends up staying in Geneva, and Codex Beza, which was Theodore Beza was the linguist of the time in Geneva. He taught linguistics and translation, Greek and Hebrew and Latin and everything. He had the gift of tongues. He is also given a Greek New Testament from one of these priests on the run from Constantinople. Some of them end up in Italy. And so you begin, one of the reasons you can start getting translations into the original languages is because all of a sudden you've actually got Greek New Testaments for the first time. They'd all been over in Constantinople. Nobody spoke Greek in Europe, and so they didn't really hold on to them much in the same sort of way that they did where they still spoke Greek. And so you've got this flood of manuscripts, Greek and Hebrew. The Greek fathers that weren't available suddenly are available. And they begin, and the Christian humanist movement is set up because they're hungry for it, right? So you get you begin getting an influx of theology from the fathers that they didn't have access to. They'd only had quotes from other fathers, and then you also begin getting actual Greek New Testaments getting put into print. People start learning Greek like mad.
Wow.
People start learning Hebrew because you also begin getting Hebrew Old Testaments, and so you get this burst of learning right at the same time. That's translation that you're getting a new Latin translation of the Bible. You get English translations of the Bible during this time. You get the first German translation. So this is all happening all at the same time. And when the government, the civil government, steps in to protect the church from other members of the church, the German Christians are being protected from Italian Christians that are attacking them. And so the German Christians, it makes sense that they would start saying, well, I identify with my Germanness as much as my Christianity, right? Because with my civil prince as much as with my pastor, because my civil prince just saved me from the Pope.
Right.
So you start getting, and the something similar is going on in England, right? The Pope is trying to win back through civil means, through coercive means, through force. This is all before the Counter-Reformation, because the Counter-Reformation actually corrects some of the errors within the Roman Catholic Church as well. But at this time, so you get this sudden influx of princes that get convicted by the scriptures, which are now being treated as a public authority. And so they step in and protect the church. And then the church is happy to hand over authority to the ones that are protecting them.
Right. So it wasn't just like
it wasn't a power grab at that point. And so that's why it's so difficult sometimes to understand some of this, because we don't have experience of a government that is not in the midst of a power grab.
Right.
Because that comes later.
Okay. So this is leading up to
So then what happens is you have the Counter Reformation, and within the Roman Catholic Church, and they stop trying to assassinate people. They realize that you have popes come along that say, hey, you know what? We actually don't even need assassins on payroll because we're not a civic authority. Right?
Oh, wow. Okay.
So that understanding. So, I mean, you still have a civic authority in Vatican City, and
sure.
But they aren't an international civic authority anymore. It begins to go away. The Holy Roman Empire as well begins to go away. So imperial authorities all are dissolved when the scriptures are treated as a public authority.
So they lost that one.
So they lost that one. But the assumptions or the philosophical aspects that made high Roman Catholicism make sense, the metaphysical assumptions as well as the assumptions about authority, and then the assumptions, those become the Enlightenment. Right? Those assumptions begin to work their way out through different thinkers. That and it is the things that the Reformation had tried to remove from high medieval Christianity in order to return to a more historic faith. Right?
And what are some of those assumptions?
The fact that that the Bible, the reason it's an authority is because
back to authority again.
It matches the standard
right.
of authority. It's not the standard itself, but the Bible matches it. Right.
Okay. So this is all for me. So understanding this, while it seems like the Reformation in that sense is winning or has won or has done a great thing, what comes is there's still this seed inside of Catholicism that is questioning maybe or is the foundation of, is it though?
Yeah. So
is it still the authority or?
Yeah. So you have, you've got, philosophical thinkers that run off in sort of so if you're going to just summarize the Enlightenment is an attempt to have, or is a belief that you can have power over the nature of things, rather than think the anti-Enlightenment would say, well, no, our job is to submit things to their nature and bring them to their intended end, right? That everything has a nature and it's supposed to be used a certain way. And our job is to discover what the nature is and then use it that way and bring it to its intended end. That's what maturity looks like.
That's the foundations of everything we talked about with metaphysics.
100%. Yeah. So, but the Enlightenment said, well, actually, you can have power over the nature of things. Our job is to gain power over the nature of things, whether it's power over our own nature or power over the nature of the world.
Oh, my goodness. You could be like God.
Yeah, exactly. So you have the Enlightenment project is a question of gaining power over nature, gaining power over the nature of things in general, whether it's through words, through technology, through philosophical inquiry.
So when you talk about the Enlightenment, we're not just post-Enlightenment; we're actually in it still, right?
Yeah. So we're right. I mean, we're probably peak Enlightenment right now, and so if I've got a person sitting across from me, and the Christian reformational historic Christian, whatever you want to call it, the pre-Enlightenment Christian question is, what kind of creature am I dealing with? Well, creature made in the image of God. What is a creature made in the image of God for? Well, they are for worship. So how is it that I help this creature, this person, achieve the end for which they were created? Right? Because then their nature will find satisfaction in its own. It will find fulfillment in its own satisfaction.
That's what it's designed to do.
That's what it's designed to do.
Yeah.
And so this is where debates about natural law get funky, because they used to call that natural law, right? You're finding what the nature of a thing is, and then what are the laws by which the nature of that thing ought to be used, and then trying to use that thing according to its nature.
If that's the definition of natural law, I'm in.
Right.
Yeah, I'm in.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
But then there have been people that have tried to reclaim that use of natural law and
post-Enlightenment,
make it something else, or even during the Enlightenment.
Oh, okay.
This is where the book I mentioned, The Heavenly City of the 18th Century Philosophers, is really useful, because that book, he tracks the change of the use of the words, like nature, right? Of law, natural law, the nature's laws, those sorts of things. Those words, have all been shifted through the Enlightenment to mean something different than what they used to mean. And so you've got somebody that says, oh, Thomas Aquinas was a natural law theologian. So, well, which use of natural law? That's the question.
What natural law are you referring to?
And sometimes, because some of these things didn't become hyper clear until the Reformation, it was a mix, right? You'd find guys that were they're still trying to find out. They're in the midst of discussing in order to get to the definitions. Because Vody says it's all an argument over the dictionary, right? It's argument over definitions. So you've got this this move in the Enlightenment to begin saying, well, discovering the nature of a thing is so that we can control it and change it. Right? So and it makes sense that because that was a high medieval understanding of I mean, it's basically transubstantiation, but for everything, right? Transubstantiation in the high medieval sense was that the priest, because of the authority that was granted to him by the highest authority in the world, the Pope, through the archbishop, through the bishop, down to the priest, he was given authority by the highest civic authority in the world to be able to change the nature of bread and wine into something that gave people power. Right? That understanding of what authority is for and how it should be used, and that when you've got a high enough authority, you can actually change the nature of things. You no longer are submitting to, you're changing the nature of things. That view becomes the Enlightenment view, so that you be all the way to where Hegel, will say something like the state is the ultimate ideas of reality enforcing themselves through the authority of the state, right? So he was in favor of state worship because the government should be given enough power that it can actually change the nature of things, because the nature of things are fluid, because there's the ideal is yet to be reached, but it's the goal of the state, the power, the civic coercive state. It's their goal to actually transform everything until it reaches its ideal nature, right? It's because it doesn't have a solid nature. So
I'm sitting here listening to you, and I'm holding my head because I'm thinking everybody's around here yelling Marxist,
yeah,
and all other sorts of things like Foucault,
Yeah.
they're pulling their hair out, and it's like Enlightenment. Should be. So then this is because so it would be fair to say that after the Enlightenment is why we start getting things ultimately like evolution. Why we start getting, I mean, if you start messing with the nature of things, you have to figure out
Yep. Yeah,
what other false god you got to put in there to make it work.
When you start removing the nature of things, that things no longer have a nature that is given to them by God in their creation. When that starts happening, then the question is, well, who decides what is what? At the Enlightenment, many people would say it begins with "I think, therefore I am." Right? That I become it does in many ways. It begins there. I think, therefore I am. But it becomes, I declare what I am now to become. I become what I declare I am.
Yeah.
Right. That because the central authority structure, as the Enlightenment is, I mean, in the high medieval age, when these ideas are around, the highest authority in the world is the Pope, and then it becomes the state, the king, right? As everything breaks apart, and the Pope willingly lets go of some of the things that he shouldn't have taken on because of the Counter-Reformation. The kings step in and say, I now am that highest authority, but then that is dissolved as well. So you have the Declaration of the Divine Right of Kings, and you've got these sorts of things that go on during that time, because they're trying to figure out where is the
who's
solid
in charge?
Authority, right?
This is a covenantal problem.
It is a covenantal problem. Well, it's the solution is all covenantal. So,
but even so, they're still figuring out. They're looking at where's the transcendent.
Right.
Who's transcendent?
Who is transcendent?
Yes.
So Queen Elizabeth, right? I mean, I'm a Presbyterian, but Queen Elizabeth is, I think, one of the greatest leaders ever, and she hated the Presbyterians. You read her speeches. She's very devout and pious and wonderful leader, but she rightly saw that if you get rid of the bishops, if the authority structure of the church shifts and changes, that it's going to have implications for the civil magistrate. If there's no bishops, you'll have no kings.
You know who figured that out too? Joe Biden in 2020. Sorry, too soon. I mean, when you look at it, I mean, ultimately, that is exactly what we just got done facing.
Right.
In the pandemic. I mean, it feels so fresh. It's almost like different faces, same story.
Same story over and over, right? So you have this.
But what's worse about this, and I'll let you go, I'm sorry. What's worse about this is we have no concept.
Yeah, we don't have any idea what's going on, right? So we've, because for us, it's because we are so informed by the Enlightenment and we're so formed by the Enlightenment, we think this is all a problem in the civic government. The civic government is the thermometer.
So explain that. So you're right. That's exactly what we think it is. Explain how we think that, though.
We think we've got a fever and we think, man, I've got to get a new thermometer. So we shake it and we're like, what? We got to fix this thermometer. If I can get the numbers down, if I stick it in ice or something, that my fever has gone away. The civil government, and this is what Queen Elizabeth understood. If we shift and change things in the church, it's going to have a result in the civic realm. And so she opposed Presbyterianism because it was her job to defend the throne. She believed that God had given her the job of defending the throne. And so she opposed Presbyterianism. Now, some of the Presbyterians also made some terrible moves at the time.
What? Never.
But they believed that Presbyterianism had a deeper legal claim to the organization of the British Church, of the Church of the British Isles. And I think that they were right legally, and then they made some bad moves to try and implement it. They made illegal moves to try and accomplish a legal end, which is wrong. And so
we've seen that.
Yeah, you've seen that. So but Queen Elizabeth understood that actually, if you change the church, you end up changing the civil magistrate eventually, right? And what what ended up happening was the move towards democratization that happened as the Reformation Church embraced Enlightenment principles. The Reformation Church was democratized and became.
What do you mean by democratized?
More of where they started to believe that the rule of the magistrate was at the will of the people. Right?
I got what you're saying.
That demos is the one who decides who rules itself. The people decide who rules.
No
them.
Federal representation.
Right. So
yeah.
So
okay.
So you begin getting a lot of moves within the broader evangelical historic Reformed churches towards that democratization, and they begin believing that salvation by faith alone means that I decide my devotion, and that defines who I am. That gives me a new nature, that I can decide to have a new nature. Right.
Yeah. Pelagianism almost.
Yeah, it becomes a Pelagianism. It starts out as an Arminianism, even though I don't know if Arminius himself believed in Arminianism.
Right.
But you have this move within a few generations. The Enlightenment spreads, and the assumptions about the nature of the world, the nature of our relationship to our neighbor, the nature of our relationship to God. It's decovenantalized because the Enlightenment is an individualistic. It is not a covenant.
That's interesting. So then you have this thing you have these spheres. You have, like you were talking earlier, you have this government of the family, right?
Yeah.
You have this government of the church. You have this government of the state. All real operating governments, right? And then now you get to this place where individualism becomes the thing. It's the individual and the state.
Right.
Right. That's all that matters.
That's all that there is the individual and the state. In Enlightenment thinking, there is, and then it's a debate between which is powerful enough to change the nature. And so you got the individualists, that are saying, no, come on, I individually am the one that is powerful enough to change my nature. And then other people would say, no, it's the state that is powerful enough to change the nature of humanity. And so you've got and there's the other part of that. So you're choosing between Trinitarian heresies.
and that's the only options you think exist.
Right.
And so you're begging one of those two people, which is really interesting because, okay, so I've always looked at this and said, okay, you see what's happening in the community and culture, and you're like, where's mom and dad at?
Right.
Somebody bring me a stick and let's beat some parents into understand they're responsible for these kids.
Hold on a second. Are you guys already recording?
We are already recording.
You guys are the worst. I'm arriving early.
You know what?
But here's the thing.
You just missed it too. We were talking about the Enlightenment.
This was supposed to be just a quick explanation of the Enlightenment.
That's what it was.
That we would finish before you got here.
Okay.
And now that you're here,
and now you're only an hour into it, you still have
51 minutes.
51 minutes.
51
and
minutes.
we just now got to the Enlightenment. So
So I'm doing 2 episodes, which means 3-4 hours.
Yeah.
No, here's what's crazy. This episode is actually over.
Yeah.
When you got here.
Goodbye, everybody. I've been Joffrey.
That's what we're actually going to talk about now, though. This goes right into our conversation still, I think.
It really does, yeah.
But
should we wrap it up and then start a new one?
I think we should wrap it up.
Okay.
And start a new one. But I don't want to forget, as you were saying, we have such a massive fallout from I think, the Enlightenment is over. We're done. We're still in it in one sense. So we don't even know where this thing ends at yet, really?
Anytime anybody says, I am who I choose to be, or I get to pick my
Yes.
My identity, anything.
They, them, cat. Yeah. Right.
I'll let my kids wait to be baptized.
Okay, so I think we all see that in some sense secular, and you, Jeff, you can jump in here. We're just going to shut it down. But we see all that. You got notes. Jason brings books. You bring notes.
Yeah, these aren't notes. It's saying Jason's going to be interested to see. That's all.
Oh, okay. All right.
But, for the next episode.
We see that, I think, as it relates
like
to
poetry.
the
Let's get me
LGBTQ
excited.
movement. We see that it relates to the Alphabet Mafia. We see that in all leftism. Like, they are embracing that fully. Like, postmodernism embraces all that.
Yeah.
What we don't see it in is in ourselves. So how do we I just want to wrap up with how we see in post-enlightenment inside of Christendom necessarily in ourselves.
Yeah. I mean, as soon as we think that our job is to find the ideal and begin imposing it rather than seeing God work his sanctification by the Spirit through us, in our families, in our governments, in our states, in our cultures. We are thinking in terms of the Enlightenment. We're thinking we've got to that's not the kind of creature we are. We are historical beings. Our job is to live within history and be and walk with the Spirit. And that is what actually moves us towards the end for which God has created us. Right? Is to say, how do I walk with the Spirit right now within history? Not what is the ideal and how do I impose it? Which is so opposed to the way we just think normally.
Yeah.
That it almost feels like an impossible task.
And I just want to add in one thing too is the idea that we do not see, at least from what you're telling me, the idea that we do not see the Word of God as absolutely the final authority on the situation. And I was just talking to Toby about this, and he said something about church conferences, and I think this speaks right to Enlightenment stuff. Church conferences will have all sorts of spiritual, theological, solid biblical teachings on everything, right? And they have no concept whatsoever. And you'll go to all the church conferences and they'll, the church is this, is the pillar on earth. Like they just will throw on the importance of the church, the government of the church, but then they have nothing of the church that speaks to the civil magistrate, or if it has anything to say about the civil magistrate's job and what it's supposed to do at all. Does not speak to that ultimately, except for Romans 13, which is to obey your civil magistrate, period.
Yeah. But the question, the question of who the civil magistrate even is not even something that we know how to discuss, right? So in America, is the civil magistrate Joe Biden?
Right.
Is it the Constitution? Is it my mayor? What is it? Where we don't. I don't think we even. Our civil magistrate is a historic question in a Christian understanding, right? It's a question of rightful authority that is answered with historical arguments.
Yeah, and my point is,
and we don't know how to have those.
That's right.
Yeah.
Nor do we know who or how to attribute that authority to.
Which is why books like this one, The Common Mind, are so helpful. The one that you mentioned at the beginning, because it actually gives us the vocabulary for having the discussions we don't know we're not having.
That's so good. Okay.
All right.